Welcome to another change-making conversation from Baptist News Global. You're listening to a special podcast series titled Highest Power, Church and State, featuring writer, poet, and musician Rick Pidcock. Now here's Rick.
We're continuing our series today on Raj Patel's book, The Value of Nothing, where I sat down with one of my seminary professors in 2021 to discuss its implications not only for our democracy, but also for theology and the church. If you missed part 1, you may want to go back and listen to episode 149. As I mentioned in our last episode, we structured our conversation as a back and forth where we each shared quotes from the book that stood out to us, and then we asked each other questions about the quotes. Before we get into today's conversation, I wanted to share that it starts with a quote that uses the word disability to communicate how our distorted sense of self gets projected onto others. And it's been 5 years since this conversation, and I now know that the word disability may be triggering to some who are sensitive to ableist language. I think if I were to discuss this metaphor today, I'd probably not use the word disability and instead talk about a lack of self-awareness, because I think that's ultimately what Patel is getting at. We're not aware of the water we're swimming in or of the assumptions we have and how the environment that creates affects others as we project our commodification onto them. So I just wanted to name that prior to playing this conversation. I think the overall point is still important to wrestle through, even if the metaphor Patel used in 2009 when he originally wrote the book may have more baggage connected to it than we were aware of in the past. So here is part 2 of my conversation with my seminary professor, Jacob Robinson.
On page 21, he says, seeing the world through markets not only distorts our sense of ourselves, but projects our own disability onto everyone else. So what is this lens of markets that affects what is it about this lens of markets that affects how we see ourselves and what we project onto our neighbors?
Yeah, when I read this one, instantly the connections between market economy and the church became evident. And even just how market economy has infiltrated the church, and especially a lot of modern evangelical churches. Because the lens of a market makes everybody a commodity, right? They are either labored to be used or consumers to be used to purchase. In either way, or in some ways, with the church, it's consumers to take their money, whether it's through their time or through offering or whatever. And so, but in this market lens, everyone is a commodity of some sort. And what's interesting is with essentially the way that a lot of modern evangelicalisms come, with these like the seeker-friendly sort of model, is that everybody who comes in the door is a potential like consumer, and literally like a potential consumer of Jesus for your own profit. And they aren't wanderers looking for solace. They aren't curious searching for a God. They are essentially, there's somebody coming looking for a sale. And so what does it mean when we have taken the deep yearnings of our heart and our spirit and we've commodified it? And what's interesting is, I think when we have taken this market view, not only of religion itself, we actually see ourselves from it. Like, oh, I have benefited from this, right? I have this and this and this, and this other person needs it too. So I'm going to become the great marketer of Christianity for this person. And the thing is when you do that, you're actually projecting your own distorted marketed view of faith upon them. You don't even allow them to sort of like engage God on their own terms. You essentially start forcing them to engage God on your terms, which are sort of distorted in the first place. So to me, this is tragic. Man, I wish we could just pull out all the sort of marketing principles that churches have been using for the last 30 years and sort of see what would the church look like if we actually based each other on relationships, not as market values.
Yeah, I remember it's been, I guess, almost 20 years now since I've read this. So forgive me if I'm mischaracterizing this, but the one of the biggest books was The Purpose-Driven Church. And I distinctly remember he had this page called Saddleback Sam. And it was a picture of this guy named Saddleback Sam. And it was like, this is this guy's makeup of who he is. This is how much money he makes. This is what radio stations he listens to. This is what movies he likes to watch. Now let's like craft this religious experience to like attract him like almost as a customer type thing. And that has really permeated a lot of the way building churches has happened. Even in like you get the seed money of the prosperity gospel stuff, you plant your seed of whatever of $100 or something, and all of a sudden God's gonna reward you with all kinds of money down the road. It's almost like an investment thing.
Yeah. I mean, I remember there's a church here that I went to for a while, and I sort of stopped going simply because I was greeted so many times before I even got to the sanctuary. One morning I counted, I got greeted 7 times by the time I even got to the sanctuary. Oh, we're so glad you're here. Thanks for coming. Thank you. I'm like, I've been going to this church for 3 years. Like, I know why I'm here. I know where I'm going. I don't need to be greeted like I'm a stranger. In fact, the fact that you think I'm a stranger means there's maybe a problem here. And it just got really, I'm like, really? Am I just this person that you want to try to make happy so I come back again? Is that really what the church is about? And then I remember I had a conversation recently with a friend who went and visited an Antiochian Orthodox church. It's sort of a version of Greek Orthodox. And he told me the story when the first Sunday he went, he walked in and the priest said, just so you know, we don't care that you're here. He's like, because it's not about you. This is all about God. So don't expect us to cater to you. We don't care that you're here or not. But hopefully you're here for God. And when I heard that story, I'm like, man, that would be so refreshing if we actually didn't think it was about us and meeting our market expectations of consumerism. What if it really was just about God? But yeah, and I wonder, but my guess is most marketing principles probably wouldn't say that would go over very well. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like this connection here in this quote, from distorting our sense of selves and projecting onto everyone else. There is a connection here between self and neighbor. The way you treat yourself is the way that you tend to treat others. And I think ultimately that's a reflection of how you see God. And so like there is a self, neighbor, God convergence going on here. And usually the way you see one is the way you're going to see the other. But yeah, and when you're using that through the lens of profit and marketing, it's probably not the way a healthy relationship is supposed to function.
Yeah, and I think competition is another great thing to talk about with this. I remember watching one of I think it was The Bachelor or something like that, one scene. I watched it once. I'm like, the idea that like competition being the foundation of a love relationship is really jacked up. Like, is that really how love is supposed to start, with competition? And then I sort of asked, man, but churches will do the same thing. Churches feel like, they're competing with each other for your attendance and your money. I'm like, is competition really sort of the way a faith relationship should be based on? And you're right. And I wonder, is that based also on this idea that we think God is competing for our love or something like that? I don't know. But yeah, this idea of competition, and it's like, is this really the best foundation of love and faith? My guess is probably no, but yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder if the competition may be ratcheting up as the people who are going to churches is dwindling.
Yeah.
And if maybe there's a relationship there.
Yeah, a little supply demand relationship. Yeah. got another one for you here. This will be coming off page 34. And actually, I'm going to read a little bit more, just to get you more background. So I'll start on page 33. This was actually a guy doing some people doing some research regarding like generosity and selfishness among chimpanzees and other primates, and then also correlated to humans. He writes, humans have an advantage over chimpanzees because we have not only the possibility of punishment, but the quality of mercy too. A particular striking set of experiments demonstrates this by asking you to put some money for me in an account. The sum grows, and you can then choose how much I should give back to you, threatening me with the option of a fine if I do not cooperate. When you don't threaten me with a fine, I tend to give more money than I would if there were the possibility of the fine. So having the ability to punish, but choosing not to, increases cooperation and trust. I know for you, there's something you've been thinking a lot about regarding your faith and even how you understand everything. So how did this sort of story relate to you regarding the idea of like punishment and being fined as opposed to just letting people be generous?
Yeah. So like I grew up in the 1980s and 90s, which you might remember was like the convergence of purity culture and left behind culture. And then Bill Clinton came into office, which was like, everyone thought was the end of the world. I grew up in Georgia and we had a Civil War reenactment thing going on the other side of the street from my school. So we were literally hearing about all this stuff with bombs going off in the background, which was interesting. But we were just terrified. Like at any moment the rapture was going to happen. Bill Clinton was going to hand the United States over the United Nations, and we're going to become a one world government. And then so there was just a lot of this religious and political fear that we had. And I think that like just the entire system was just built on this fear of punishment. God's going to punish the world with the tribulation. God's going to punish you if you don't get all the stuff right. God's going to punish America. And again, I go back to the 1 John 4, where he says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. And then ironically, he goes on to talk about loving your brother. And so that's the implication of this. And so I think that for me, like seeing this is just coming to terms with, okay, if there is a God, like, yeah, he could punish me for whatever he wants to do. But I came to this point in my relationship with God where I realized if that's going to happen, then I'm just screwed anyway, So, I mean, like, there's nothing I can do about that. And so like, what if God actually wants to have a relationship with me? What if God does want this relationship to be based on love? Because that's where healthy relationship goes. And that's where I think a lot of the fear for me just disappeared. And so I think it's in that coming together in love of self, neighbor, and God that we do move forward. It's in that convergence that liberation does happen. And so that's kind of where I've been at with that.
So to bring Peter Abelard back up, it's interesting because I do think that a lot of this, especially within Christianity, stems back to this whole idea of atonement theories and the idea of like this fear of punishment for God, that somehow my sin dishonored God and I'm going to be under God's wrath. And so whether it's penal substitution or satisfaction theories, like all these sort of are based on this fear and this idea of punishment. And then all of a sudden we have this Peter Abelard who says, no, it's actually not about punishment. It's actually about love. So So what do you think about, so what's the benefits of maybe understanding of atonement theory through the concept of love as opposed to punishment?
Yeah, and I think for one, I just look at healthy relationships. Like my relationship with my wife is based off of love, and we never think about punishing each other. Like if we thought about punishing each other, what would that do to our marriage? Like it makes no sense. And I think it's ironic. Like there's a new book that just came out, The Making of Biblical Womanhood, and one of the people she mentions is Peter Abelard, and she mentions how he stood up for women and fought for women to be able to utilize their gifts in preaching. And I just think, just an observation, it's interesting that the guy who has an atonement theory based on love just happens to be the guy who is standing up for his sisters. And again, I think he was probably a complicated guy. I don't want to idolize him and act like he didn't have any issues. I'm sure he did. I know he did from some of the things that I've read. But when you start with that, ultimately atonement theories and justice is about what makes things right. And when what makes things right is about punishment and getting even and settling a score, it doesn't foster a healthy relationship. We all know that intuitively. We need to begin to realize that theologically and accept that theologically.
Yeah, I agree.
That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, and rate us on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll be back with another episode on Monday.
This has been another change-making conversation from Baptist News Global. The episode you've just heard is part of a special podcast series titled Highest Power, Church and State. Be sure to follow BNG daily at baptistnews.com and subscribe to get notifications about future episodes. Baptist News Global is a national nonprofit news service that is independent, free, and faithful. BNG is supported by readers and listeners like you. Learn more at baptistnews.com.
This episode was produced and edited by Mac Bowles of TKG Communications, LLC, Dallas, Texas.